Hello, everyone, and welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Director of Communications at pflagnation.al. It's really good to have you with us for another episode of our show, going on year 3 of our show. I can't even believe it. Anyway, I don't want to delay. We have the most phenomenal guest joining us today. So let me bring in our host for this show, Jean Marie Nevada.
Liz Owen.
Jean Marie, how are you?
I am doing okay. Although, as you said, you mentioned 2 things that I think are interesting. One, we're going into season 3 of this show, which it started with, let's do a month of programs and then we'll stop.
It's literally been one long year, if I'm really thinking about it.
I agree with you. And then it's almost the end of the year, for which I am deeply grateful, because I'm just convinced that tech has turned against me today.
I feel like I'm just going to take myself off camera now before everything just completely dies. So let me do that.
Better. We're going to bring our guest on who is like much better and much perkier than I am at this moment, and less frustrated and going to be more interesting. So thank you, Liz, and we will probably see you a little bit later.
My pleasure.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she or ella if you use Spanish, and I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at pflagnation.al. Every single week, we get together for the past 3 years to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And today, we are talking drag. And we are really, really specifically talking drag and the show We're Here, which is a fantastic HBO program. If you haven't caught it, you definitely should. So just to get everything set up, the article that we shared with you this week, if you're interested in following along in the conversation, was from them. From Isabelle Kliger, and it was called I'm Whole Again, Eureka O'Hara on Rehab, Body Positivity, and We're Here. So the conversation, the article actually goes on to talk to Eureka about her background and some of the experiences that she's been having on this season of the show. But for those of you who do not know the fabulous Eureka O'Hara, they were actually originally from RuPaul's Drag Race. Interestingly enough, the first contestant to actually go home with an injury, which I've always imagined an injury while putting on makeup, but it really happened. A real injury happened to Eureka. But they got to come back the following season, in which they were one of the finalists and the runner-up. But Eureka has also been on the program on HBO. We're Here since 2020, traveling the country with a couple of friends, including Bob the Drag Queen, to talk to people and to perform and to see what people are saying and thinking. And we certainly know that at this particular time in our country, drag is actually something that's turned a little dangerous in many places. So I am really excited to bring Eureka O'Hara onto today's show.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing okay. I think I'm much better now that you are finally here and we can have this conversation.
Okay, cool.
So I want to get people caught up. So for people who haven't seen the show at all or who don't know you yet, I'd like to let people know a little bit about your background. So can you tell us a little about how you got into drag? And I'd love to hear about some of those people along the way who maybe shaped your journey, like your drag mom and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I love PFLAG. I've been affiliated with PFLAG in one way or another since I was like 17, probably, because we had an East Tennessee chapter that I worked really closely with when I was young and through college. And so I love and appreciate PFLAG so much for everything they do all across our country. So first, I'll start there. Second, I have had an interesting journey, but I kind of started drag around that age, actually. I started going to the queer bar where I was from, or what they called the Alternative Lifestyle Club. At like 16, 17 with a fake ID. And I just remember as soon as I saw drag, I was obsessed. And so I immediately got involved, like dressing the girls and trying to hang out with the queens and things like that. And as soon as I turned 18, I couldn't get to the stage fast enough. I remember the first time I ever performed, I was so terrified that I walked out on stage with my purse on my arm and I stood in one spot and I couldn't move. I was so scared.
A little like the Queen of England with your purse.
Very that. Which I love, like 16th century fashion. So maybe that's another, maybe I was her in a former life. So I don't know. It was just, but I still got so much support from the crowd, which is really what made me fall in love with it, I believe. Like that first, like true passion of like, I want to do this was just getting that like unconditional support from the crowd, even though I was like terrified, and it's a art form that I feel like, especially where I'm from, was very honored, being like, it had like some pretty legendary drag queens that were from there, like Sable Chanel, which is legendary in the USA system. My drag mother, Jacqueline St. James, was a former USA at Large, which is another national pageantry system. So we had some icons when I was coming up. I first had a drag father, actually, that started finding interest in me and appreciating what I was doing and teaching me how to sew. His name was Todd O'Hara, which is where my last name came from. And then later, I became closer with Jacqueline St. James, which is where that motherhood started for me with her, which was more around like when I was like 19, 20. So I had a really, I think I had a positive starting experience just because I had like such incredible support, which was really lovely because being from East Tennessee, being overly flamboyant, like I didn't have a lot of support from my family. I was very much like the black sheep, or even though I was successful and had good grades and things like that, which was something they could be proud of, it was kind of like a don't ask, don't tell, like you just don't talk about being queer, It's something they make fun of you your whole life about, but when you start trying to have real conversations, they're just pretty much shut down and avoided. Which was most of my life. And, I guess for my drag, though, I just started doing it and I never stopped, which is kind of where I'm at today. I started at 18 and I'm still doing it at 31. So I've been doing drag for like 13 years, which is wild to think about, which is probably why I'm so great at it. Because I am good at drag. It's something that I know how to do through, like, it's my safety place, it's become my career, which is incredible, but also like it's been my therapy, it's been my, best friend, it's been, it's been everything for me, and it's helped me cultivate a chosen family, which was really important for me to have, and it's allowed me to discover who I am as a trans female. It's helped me discover who I am as a queer person in our world in general, and like kind of my place in how I can help support and be there for other people, because that's very important to me. I think a lot of queer people, that's really important too, because we don't really have that support when we're first coming out and coming up. So I think whenever we can be that for other queer people, it's just really important to us to be able to be that. And I know for me, like I found my self-worth in that for a long time until I became more confident as a person. I guess that's kind of my beginnings. Is that enough?
That was perfect.
Okay.
And it was actually perfect. And you even gave me more than I was hoping for, because I think you said two things that are so important for people to hear. First of all, you did refer to drag as an art form. And I think it really is, because I don't think a lot of people understand how much goes in to becoming who you are when you go on that stage. I mean, the costumes, the makeup, the performance, everything. It truly is an art. And I think the other part that I love that you talked about was how it helped you find yourself and find your community. I think people think of it as the show they go to, not realizing that behind that show in our community, drag is so much. It is family, it is support, it is your network. It's how you learn how to be who you are. And so I appreciate that. Now, you mentioned your last name, so I do need to ask about your first name. Where did it come from?
Well, so Eureka actually is my mother's name. So my mom's from Germany, first generation. So it was spelled Ulrike. So it's like Ulrika. And we had a Eureka vacuum cleaner growing up. So like whenever I decided to like be a drag queen, I just kind of was like, okay, well, Eureka's felt like with the vacuum cleaner is easy for Americans to say, and it's honoring my mom at the same time. So, I just really wanted that female persona to honor her.
I love that. And the name was totally the way for you to pull it off. I love that. So, We're Here isn't just showing the performances, although you get parts of that. It's really different from Drag Race. And it's actually telling some surprising stories. And I think so much of what makes the show interesting is what is happening when you visit these different places. So when you first started the show, when season 1 was beginning, what kind of goals did you have in mind for the program?
I think that when we started season 1, like I was just grateful to be doing more with drag. I think my goals were to okay, so I remember whenever I was competing for Drag Race, it kind of starts there. So when I was competing for RuPaul's Drag Race and I was competing to win, I was releasing these like spoken word, like deeper meaning type poems and doing videos for them and just really leaning on this like emotional side of drag and how it's been so supportive and I've learned so much and like using it as into like leaning into a different artistic direction with it. And I just remember getting so much flack from people, just commenting like, Eureka, you're funny, and that's what we want to see is you be funny. Like this is so deep and this isn't drag and things like that. But for me, drag has always been deeper than just the fun and the excitement. It's been emotionally driven. It's been powerful in that way. It's been supportive to people. I've seen the power of drag in that emotional space. And I think that was my goal with We're Here was to show people how powerful drag can be and how rewarding and emotionally rewarding it can be and supportive, and I think that we really succeeded with season 1, which was my goal. And then we're on season 3, which is wild to think about. We even survived filming through a pandemic, which was really crazy. And I feel like this year has been so exciting because it's our first year really getting to present the season in a way where the world's open again. So season 1, we were cut short because of the pandemic starting. Season 2, we were a part of those productions that first started filming again once like things were regulated less intensely and allowing people to kind of go out and work on productions, but very strict guidelines because of COVID.
Yeah.
So this season, it's been exciting because we've been able to like really go into these areas and really be back to the exploration that we started with, which has been amazing. I like to ramble, so I can go from one point to another.
We're a dangerous combination because I love listening to people talk. So I could sit here all day and you could talk about whatever you want and I will be absolutely transfixed. This show could go on a long time, Eureka. So I will admit to you that when I watched my first episode of the show, part of me was like, oh my gosh, this is like Tu Wong Fu, but in real life, like they're really doing it. Like you're really going into these places and it's not a fictional account, which made me wonder about how did the team select the places that you are going? I mean, certainly they are not, you're not going to queer meccas. You're not coming to where I live in Palm Springs. You're in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and Selma and Watertown. What was the logic behind deciding the locations?
Well, we have an incredible casting team, first of all. And second, the creators of the show, the entire point of the show was really to highlight small town existence and the juxtaposition of how people exist still today when you think that we're so progressive, how people are suffering or how they are navigating through their queer existence in these areas that aren't so liberal, that aren't as open as, let's say, West Hollywood in California. You can go like LA, obviously, we went out just like a couple hours away just to a city like Temecula and how different it is, versus in this area where it's, commonly accepted and people have kind of deemed big city living, etc. And I think that's really what the locations and the places are based on the stories and the people that we find and the casting team find to tell their stories, and it seems to work out. I think season 3, we were a little more particular on the places that we wanted to go due to the political uprise against LGBT and drag entertainment. It was very important for us to go to Florida because of the anti-gay bills. Texas was another state that was really important. I think Utah was very important just because it's so religiously driven, which is a huge conversation. I think Mississippi was important because they wanted to still showcase that racial divide even still in the queer community and those struggles. And then New Jersey was another one of those places where we wanted to again show how different it can be literally just outside of like an hour outside of New York City,
Yeah. Yeah, I found it really interesting as a Jersey person. That was interesting to me, but I live in California now. When I saw Temecula, which isn't that far from where I live, it is one of those places where it's always a reminder that even an hour outside of some of our biggest, most popular queer areas, it can really change. So when you're in those places, and I'm glad that you mentioned the intentionality of where you were choosing this year, and also sort of the backdrop of I would say the backlash against drag, the backlash against our community, which has been ramping up for years, but it's really powerful right now. You've encountered some, let's say, surly individuals along the way. Is there anything that has surprised you about them? I think we all have our visual in our head of who these people who protest who we are can be. Is there any surprises along the way?
I guess living in current day for me, it's still always so surprising when I come across people that just don't want to hear what you have to say. They don't care about the truth. They're just solely guided by their own personal opinion and their own element of hatred, which is really alarming, and it's scary, and it's always shocking to me because it's just like this person just wants to hate for whatever reason that they feel in their hearts to hate, and they don't want to hear any retaliation. They can't be proven anything else or any other opinion. They can't be shown any other way. And that's always the most alarming to me. And the most surprising is when we come across people like that. But in the same breath, it's also very surprising. Like I met an older man in Texas who was very open with me about how things would have been received, us being there, period, let's say 10 years ago. And he was very honest about the way he would have probably even had to react because of his peers. And he explained how he learned so much in the Vietnam War and being exposed to different culture and the traumas of that and things like that. So that's also very surprising to me. Like when I come across those people that they're willing to have those real conversations and be like, you're correct. This is how things would have went before. So although it's still hard and tough, it was so much worse, which is, I hate to say it, it is exciting because at least it shows some change, but it's also very alarming because it's just like, oh, wow, it's been worse. You know what I mean? This isn't the words of it. Yeah.
No. I mean, when you consider this is sort of the best of it for some places, and the best of it is still pretty scary. And it often, to me, it feels like we're slipping backwards, which I think is some of it. Have any of these encounters that you've had changed the way you bring yourself into your work? Do you find yourself being more cautious, more guarded, or has it just absolutely like supercharged Eureka to make you sort of like more aggressive about this than ever?
Well, I think that my passion is more politically driven for sure. I've never been the type of person, and I think this might be for our community in general, and hopefully, but I've never been the person to really follow politics. I've been that person that's like, oh, I'll vote for like what makes sense from like the few things that I've learned or heard about. So basically the person that all my other gay friends are voting for is who I'm going to vote for was my, that's kind of how I did politics before. But it has definitely driven me to educate myself and to understand what's happening around me and also pay attention to other legislation, not just the presidential, which is very important, that I had never even thought about learning about before. Down to like, I'm now paying attention to who's running for city council. You know what I mean?
I love that.
It's that. And I hope that more and more people are learning that that's very important. The thing is like a lot of our politics are driven by middle America. And middle America is driven by old moral values and family values that have been, passed down and that are very anti-LGBT in our existence. So we really do need to educate ourselves more, which is what I've done differently probably and learned from it all. And also like letting other people know too, being more vocal about voting and having these discussions about it. It's really important.
I see a whole campaign for you, like drag the vote. Like you could have your whole voter mobilization thing, like under that. Like,
Yes,
you're onto something, Eureka.
I love
So
that.
you've spoken really openly. In fact, the article that we shared this week really did feature a pretty big piece of a conversation about your struggles with substance abuse and coming to grip with mental health and taking care of yourself. And I love, there was a quote in this particular article where you said it is being sober is what makes you invincible. Yet we still know there's a ton of stigma around mental health issues and substance abuse, people who don't want to talk about it because of how they feel they'll be judged. What was it that made you want to decide to be so very public about it and engage in this conversation?
Well, I was very blessed to have support and to get the help that I needed when I needed it. I went through a really traumatic time last Christmas, actually. It's been a year ago. And I lost my grandmother on her birthday in November. And that was kind of like her and my mother were the two people that were always there for me, that made me exist growing up and made my life, really, at the time I felt like worth living. Those were the people I was pushing for success to impress, was my mother and my grandmother. So when I lost her, I just went to a dark place. I couldn't go home for the holidays because of COVID. And it was just a rough year, and I really fell into a bottle, and I fell into that, late night pity party. But the mirage convinces you that it's such a fun and amazing time, but really you stop taking care of yourself due to the depression and due to the substance abuse. And, the alcohol turned into other, drugs late at night. And it was just a version of me that I had never met before. And it was scary, and I didn't really know what being an addict was, and I became one, and it was just a version of me that was not conducive to who I want to be and the way I want to treat people and my friends and my family, and it caused me to isolate. It was just a scary time. And luckily, before I made any crazy decisions and really ruined anything too huge in my life, I got help, which I needed. And I think that I wanted to be public about it because I wanted to be held accountable, one. And two, I wanted to have these discussions. I've learned through my platform that the more honest I am, the more authentic and the more good I can do with the work that I'm doing. And, you can talk about it, but I'm a be about it kind of person. So this is a conversation that needs to be had because I know a lot of queer people specifically that go through this struggle because of the trauma that we go through as children, the religious trauma, the emotional trauma, the family trauma. There's so much. And I just didn't realize how much trauma I needed to work through until I went to rehab and was given the opportunity to dissect, my childhood, the bad things that I went through, the sexual assaults, the bullying, so many things that I had never faced. And I got the opportunity to, and I learned a lot about how to navigate this world with healing trauma. And it has just made me a better leader and a better person, and a better drag queen, and a better friend. And I say, being sober is me being invincible, but it's not even about not ever touching a drink again for me. I don't judge anyone that needs to let loose however they feel. I'm not saying that, that's not my platform or job or position. My position is when you're doing anything at an unhealthy level and you're putting anything above your own health or loved ones or anything like that, you have to really take a moment, step back, and dissect and look at what you're doing to yourself, and that's what made me invincible, was learning how to feel all of my emotions, allowing myself to, giving myself some slack, but also clearing my head and not fogging it, and not, because you don't make anything go away. You just pack it down and pack it down,
and you eventually it comes out.
Yeah, you ignore it. And that's another thing is people say numbing a lot, like, oh, you self-medicate and you're numbing yourself. You're never numbing yourself. You're just covering it up or ignoring it. But it's worse when you're using. And it comes
Yeah.
out
And
much
I
heavier.
think that's the scary thing for so many people, regardless of what kind of trauma you're facing, this idea that at some point you do have to face it, and this acknowledgement that living in a trauma state should not be your norm. And yet for so many of us, it was our norm, constantly coping. So we only have a little bit more time, and I have two more questions that I want to make sure I get to.
Okay.
I think about shows like yours, and I think about how many people are now going to drag shows. It used to be something that us queers just did, but now we're seeing all of these other people coming into the shows, and you have such an opportunity to shift perceptions. And we are seeing it all the time. All of these straight families who are coming out of drag shows, and suddenly their perceptions have changed. What do you really hope people will do, particularly people outside of the LGBTQ community, when they go to shows, when they go to drag shows and they come out and they've had a good time? What are you hoping it will do to influence their behavior once they get out of that show?
Well, I think that for me, I just hope it brought some light to their life. I just hope it brought some happiness. It helped them escape maybe the troubles that they're having for a moment. I think that's all I ever really hope for the people watching my show. As far as like performances wise, my goal isn't to like change someone's life because they came and saw a drag show. My goal as a drag queen is to help you escape for a second and feel the glamour and the fantasy of drag, because that's what it is. It's this place we get to go to express ourselves and feel fabulous, in a world where not a lot of us can afford to feel that fabulous. I look rich as, a real queen of England, but mama's not that stacked. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what it's about to me. It's the fantasy, come along for the ride.
I love that. And I so appreciate that perspective. I just know that whenever I see shows, I always get so excited because it is the fantasy, and it is this over the top, and it is looking at someone performing, probably doing all the things you've dreamt about doing, and they're really doing it up on stage. And that is like the coolest thing in the whole world. If you leave not smiling, let me tell you, it's on the other person. So my last question for you is this, because we're doing this show almost at the end of the year. And we all get super reflective at the end of the year. What's the best thing that you've learned in 2022?
The best thing that I learned was that I'm trans fully, that I'm a trans female. I've lived non-binary for several years in this place of contentment, but clearing my mind and looking deeper within myself, and being able to see clearly through my recovery, I was able to discover that what I was missing was that last little piece of authenticity. So I'm, coming out of this year as, a 6'4" openly trans woman, honey, ready to live my life and thrive because I don't want any more wasted time. And I learned that from my daughter, Mandy, from Ann Dempsey, Shangela's daughter, from a Florida episode on We're Here. So go check out the story if you get a chance. It's really powerful.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, that is like one of the best things that I've heard somebody say that they've learned this year ever. It makes me so excited. And I just need to say, as you were saying it, like your whole face lit up, like in a completely different way. And I watched it, and that was so awesome. Thank you for giving me that moment. And thank you for sharing your time with us, Eureka. And thank you for everything that you're doing on this program. It is reaching people who may never actually get to a show. And you are representing for such an important part of our community and such an important tradition that I'm so proud of. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Jean Marie Nevada. I feel like you have to say all three of your names, which is fine.
It's so long. It's so long. Please come back and visit us again, and please be safe and continue being fabulous out there, Eureka.
Thank you.
Bye. That was awesome. Oh, that was so much fun. Thank you, Eureka, for being with us. If you haven't seen the show, make sure that you go see it. You can visit EurekaO'Hara.com to learn a little bit more, or go to hbo.com. /weird-here. That nearly wraps us up for the year. We will have one more show to go this year. So make sure you join us next week. But until then, we sign off the exact same way, reminding you to do 3 really important things. Make sure you run fast, you laugh hard, and most of all, that you be kind. If you need any support, please visit us at pflag.org to find your local chapter. And until then, we will see you again next week on Something to Talk About Live.